Welcome, fellow duplicants. Rhadamant here. Thank you for tuning in to the very first episode of a new series playing Oxygen Not Included, covering the Frosty Planet Pack DLC. If you would like to skip the game's overview, or the overview of this series, or even some of the explanation about the UI and other elements, please use YouTube chapters. I hope you enjoy. Before I start, Oxygen Not Included, for those that don't know, is a space colony simulation game with a lot of engineering elements. Deep inside an alien space rock, your industrious crew of duplicants will need to master science, overcome strange new life forms, and harness incredible space tech to survive, and possibly even to thrive. And the Frosty Planet Pack DLC adds in sort of cold-themed, Sub-Zero themed biomes, creatures, plants, and more. So about this specific series, I am going to be playing only the Frosty Planet Pack DLC. I am not going to be using Spaced Out. And the only mod I have enabled is one that shows temperatures in both Celsius and Fahrenheit. The asteroid type that I've chosen for myself is Ceres, which is introduced in the new Frosty Planet Pack, so let me show you that right now. So here is the Ceres one, which is includes all of the traits of the new Frosty Planet Pack. And then the world traits that I've chosen for myself, I've already created a world. It's a random seed. I haven't actually explored it at all, but it is a frozen core and large glaciers world with all of the story traits. So I did a lot of the random rolling prior to this stream, so you didn't have to watch me re-roll, but you have world traits here, story traits here. Your story traits are just enabled or disabled, whereas your world traits get randomized every time you re-roll. And I wanted one that was cold themed. So I did frozen core, so there's no like hot core in the middle of the asteroid, and also large glaciers, so there's a lot of ice for me to deal with. Story traits were all enabled for me. And then it's going to be a standard survival game. And also, this is going to be a mix of a tutorial. So if you're new to Oxygen Not Included or new to the Frosty Planet Pack, I'll try to be explaining as much as I can as I go along. And it's a let's play with no specific goal, and absolutely no focus on min-maxing or copying ideal designs. So I'm not going to just be copying, pasting, because that gets commented a lot of like, oh, you should just make like a self-powered oxygen. You know, it's like, no, I'm not going to be copying anyone's designs. I don't want to do that. It doesn't interest me. It's not me playing the game. It's me going copy-pasta. It's pretty boring. So let's get started. I have already created the world, like I said, and I have random rolled 3 of the initial duplicants with traits and skills that I thought would be most ideal for survival. I haven't actually looked much at this world, but before I even jump into that, let me very briefly explain the UI for new players. So, top left you have the cycle, which is essentially a day. They don't call it a day because there's really no sunlight unless you, well, yeah, there's no sunlight. There is space, but I digress. Population, highest stress. All 3 start off at 5% stress. You've got sicknesses, how many calories, kcals, are available for consumption. Basically, if you're at 0, you're going to start to starve. And then these little boxes here are meters, which chart trends. You've got time controls. The toggle red alert is like if there's an emergency or something. So if you have like a leak or a breakdown or something that needs an emergency, it overrides their basic scheduling and basic needs so that they can tend to the alert. So they won't be like going to the bathroom or eating or sleeping or doing any of their scheduled stuff. And then occasionally you get blueprints to unlock through the printing pod, which is how you get blueprints and also new duplicates. Up here are the warnings. So right now I have a warning about no oxygen generators are built, meaning that if I do nothing, I'm going to run out of oxygen. And then there are these little tutorials, which I will click through a few of them, but I'm not going to be watching a whole video about that. You've got vitals. So vitals is stress, morale. Morale is driven off of the types of food that they have, the types of services they have, recreation, scheduling, a lot of different stuff. And essentially you want to keep the morale higher than their needs. So as your duplicants level up, their needs will go up, and you will be expected to provide nicer things for them. So skilled duplicants have higher morale needs. Their fullness, what they've eaten today, their health, and whether they're diseased or not. Consumables is what they're allowed to eat, and I am immediately going to take pike apples, raw pike apples, off of the menu, because I don't want them eating raw food. Their schedule, and for now, I'm not even going to change that. priorities of what they're going to be working on. I'm going to change that soon, but I'm going to explain the rest of the UI first. Skills. So this is their skill tree. If they have a heart, they enjoy doing that thing. If they have an X, they are incapable of doing that thing. So for instance, the Matic here cannot research and cannot do art due to personality traits, but prefers to do digging and construction and suit wearing. Research and Star Map will be unlocked later on. Star Map almost certainly not this stream, but research pretty soon. Then you can also chart the changes over time with this little chart button. You have the database of all the information here if you need to look something up. So if you're like, hey, what is that thing? You can see the properties of it in this database, but you can also see the properties of it going to this button. So if I click a Phlox, for instance, or a Alveo Vera, I can hit this and it gives me the entry in the database. I will say, and I've said this before, playing Oxygen Not Included in the past, that sometimes the database entries for things do not include all the relevant information needed to necessarily know. So sometimes you still need to go to the wiki, which is unfortunate. You have the game's menu, which I am going to raise the music volume a little bit. And then you have overlays. So the overlays will show you like the gases or power or temperature. One important thing about temperature is sorting it by absolute temperature is not going to give you a lot of helpful information. Relative temperature is probably the new way to overview temperature. And then you can also scale it so that it's relative to a specific temperature scale. So that's just something useful to know, because in absolute temperature, everything is going to look cold and it's not actually displaying much information as a net result. All right, moving on. You have the construction tab down here for base, oxygen, power, food, plumbing, ventilation, refinement, medicine, furniture, and stations. And in the bottom right, you have orders like digging, deconstructing, prioritizing, cleaning, sweeping, harvesting, etc. All right, now that the UI is very quickly overviewed, I'm going to show you what we start with. So we start with a wood pile. Which is very handy, because normally in Oxygen Not Included, you're not given much starting resources, but the wood pile is so that you can build some initial things, because normally on Oxygen Not Included, you're surrounded by like sandstone, which is a building material, but here it's mostly like snow and ice. So the wood pile allows you to burn it for heat and carbon dioxide, and also to like do a little construction with it, because otherwise you might be stranded. It would be a problem. We have a ration box that I'm going to enable. Oops, I didn't mean to knock that out. But I'm going to enable all food to be put into it. And the ration box has a little bit of pemmican, which is fruit and tallow, like mashed up to one another. And then the starting duplicates. So the starting duplicates is Matic. Let me hide this interface for a second so you can actually see some stuff. So Matic has a personal interest of building, digging, and suit wearing. They're essentially our builder excavator. They are a uncultured yokel. Uncultured meaning cannot decorate, and yokel meaning cannot do research tasks. So, given that they're a builder digger, we can go to the priorities here and go to building and digging and raise that up. And then for suit wearing, that's not going to become relevant until we have suits that come much later on. But it also means that Matic, being the builder and digger, will probably have much higher strength than most other people, so I'm also going to slightly higher prioritize attack as a result. The next one is Scorpio. So Scorpio is also a suit wearer, and a researcher, and an operator. And has shriveled taste buds, so is happier eating nastier food, and is biohazardous, meaning lower germ resistance, so we'll get sick more often. All right, prioritize for Scorpius. We're going to do operating and research, and then moving on to Nabla. Nabla, cooking, ranching, and farming. Basically, food production and animal care. Nabla is an unpracticed artist, so can't be all that creative, but is a caregiver, so is also beneficial in medicine. So going to the priorities here, Nabla is going to be cook at top, doctor, farming, ranching. And there's our 3 starters with their priorities. All right, open up the overlay. So what I want to do immediately is to make sure that these 3 duplicates have somewhere to poo and have somewhere to sleep. those are kind of the most important things to do right when you start. But before I even jump to that, I want to go to somewhat of a broader picture. Talking about sort of later strategy. So, the broader picture to later strategy is essentially this. The world around us is like negative 40 Celsius. And if you're wondering what that does to a duplicant, again, I'll hide the overlay briefly, is when they're cold, their stamina will be drained particularly fast, and they move slower. So there's a lot of negative consequences of them being constantly cold. And the thing is, if you generate a lot of heat for them to then get warm, you end up melting everything around you, and you end up with a giant unmanageable puddle, which is maybe not wanted, right? Like, you don't want to just have a giant unmanageable puddle, because there's a lot of stuff that subsequently comes from that. For instance, cinnabar ore is just solid mercury, and you don't maybe want living in a giant puddle of mercury, is all I'm going to say. So, the broad strategy that I have come up with, and I don't know if this is meta, and I also don't really care, which is create some sort of heat-protected, insulated living quarter for the duplicants. And, you know, I'm just showing you. And then have everything that shouldn't be temperature controlled outside. So we're going to have two halves where they can sleep and eat and do some work that needs to be in a habitable environment, in a controlled, somewhat air-conditioned, warmed environment, which is airlocked and isolated from the rest of the map, so the rest of the map doesn't suffer from all the heat that I'm generating. So that's sort of like the big picture, if you will, of where I would like to work towards. And that's a big goal, and it's going to take a lot of time to get there. But my point is, from day one, we really should be working towards that, because if we're not working towards that, we're going to end up with a situation where everything is ad hoc and all messed up. So, taking a look at the map, because I actually haven't even looked at the map much. We have a research portal down here, which grants some research projects. We've got a wood heater here, which would, when the wood heater is fired up, it helps to negate some of the chilly surroundings around it. So it keeps it creates like a localized heat field, if you will, and it imparts a bonus. So when your duplicants come near it, they will get a recently warmed at a warming station. Meaning that the wood heaters dry out soggy feet and help duplicants forget how cold they are. So the wood heaters are really nice to have fired on. It's just that they require constant sources of fuel, and they also generate a lot of carbon dioxide. So, you know, they come with some downsides. Everything else around me is just plants and animals, and I'll go over them when they become relevant. So here's the thinking. It looks like there is some liquid ethanol over here, and a lot of stone. So if I want to build like a living quarter, which is comfortable, I'm probably going to want to build that to the left. That's my thinking, because it looks a little bit more clear. Essentially, I don't want to have to deal with moving liquids if I can help it. So the idea here is to build a isolated, insulated living quarter somewhere to the left, having our transportation here, and having our productivity here. So productivity would be like farms and ranches, because the local flora and fauna are designed to live in this very frozen environment. So the local flora and fauna do not want to be heated at all. In fact, they won't even survive. Most of these plants need to be cold. So that's another thing, is if we generate a lot of heat and we don't control where that heat goes, we end up killing everything, right? Everything gets out of whack. Basically, let's not commit global warming here. Let's warm our little home and keep the warming elsewhere. Before we go any further, thank you so very much for everybody gifting out subs. I really appreciate it. So Twonker, Sean, and Scorpio again. And a bunch of resubs as well. GMT, Shona, Madsy, Kitty, thank you so very much. Rise it for bits. So, as I mentioned, one of the first things we want to do is get a little bathroom set up. And right now, most of the oxygen that we're going to be breathing is going to be outgassed from oxalite. So oxalite is sort of like frozen oxygen. And until we have a better way of producing oxygen, and there's a bunch of different ways, mining out oxalite is going to be probably the best way. So what I'm going to do here, which is slightly unorthodox, is just start digging over here. And my plan is to leave a 3-wide pathway here for a ladder and a fire pole, which will allow you to go down quickly. And then eventually like a vacuum tube. And then meaning that this space over here will be the temperature isolated space. Now, initially, I'm not going to be able to really offer like temperature isolation. It's going to take a lot of infrastructure construction before I can really vacuum seal and airlock a space for the duplicants to be. So until then, what we need to do is do our best. So what I want to do is set up a few cots over this direction. So I'm going to use this nice quilted cot, and I'm going to be building this out of wood. So 3 quilted cots for 3 duplicants, where I'll put a door here, and this is just a basic barracks. So we're going to want to dig that out. And then over here, in this direction, the idea is to set up our bathroom. Now, there's other issues with the bathroom. And the other issues is as follows. 1, I might want to leave a little bit of space here for ladders as well. Ladder and a fire pole on both sides. But I might want to make this space a little bit wider as well. To not crowd the area potentially. Meaning that I'll put the ladders here, and then the outhouse will start around here. So the issue with that, of course, is anyone that has played enough Oxygen Not Included knows that, generally speaking, if you don't want to spread germs around, you need liquid water to wash your hands at a washing station, and liquid water is a little bit hard to get on this map tile. So that is probably going to be the issue that we face pretty early on. Alright, so here, as you can see, the starting area. Alternatively, what I could do is to put the outhouse on a different level. So if I go ahead and start the outhouse here, I could put it up there as well. But I think I'm going to keep it this level, meaning that I'm essentially going to ignore this water heater and the coat rack. The coat rack has 1 warm coat on it, which will keep a duplicate warm. But I'm going to ignore that because it's not built in an area that I particularly want it to be. Maybe that's a little too loud. Alright. So, these duplicants, if you're wondering, chilly surroundings. It increases stress, it decreases stamina, and it decreases athletics. So the increase of stress and decrease of stamina and athletics means that they're going to have to, like, sleep more often. They'll be more stressed, and they'll move a lot slower as a result. So these are all the factors that you get when you are in chilly surroundings, and that's why I want to keep them warm as much as I can when they're inside, sleeping, eating, doing anything that could be isolated out from the surrounding areas. So we're getting some bedrooms set up over here, and then once I dig up some metal, Cinnabot ore, I can build a door to make it a barracks. So this is another thing that I want to show. In the overlays, and again, let me hide the UI here. There are different types of rooms. So there is morale bonuses if you have specific types of rooms or even work benefits. So like, for instance, the latrine is a room with a toilet and a wash station, which is greater than 12 tiles, but no greater than 64, and with no industrial machinery, and it provides 1 morale when it's used. A barracks has 1 or more beds and no industrial machinery. So what I'm hoping to do is, in order to initially have my duplicants be somewhat happier with their surroundings, is just to give them some basic rooms where they aren't going to necessarily hate their surrounding area. And yes, I am blowing up the wood heater. I know how crazy that sounds. But I've got plans. Alright, so these doors are being built to physically isolate the room, because without a door it's not a room. But I'm just going to leave them open, because I don't need them closed. They are pneumatic doors which don't stop gas flow between areas, so they don't really offer any sort of airlock protection anyway. So there's no point in attempting to airlock them. All right. The other thing I want to do is to set up a hand wash basins here as well. But of course, I don't have a way to have them actually wash their hands because I don't have liquid water yet. So that's something that will be coming in the future. Can you not move the wood heater? No. Nope. So as you can see down here, I can deconstruct it, disable it, disinfect it, or not repair it, but moving is not a thing. Moving, in fact, is not really a thing for almost anything in Oxygen Not Included. Things are deconstructed and reconstructed. Things are never really moved. Alright, so, who should get the first coat? I was thinking the building digging Matic should get the first warm coat, because a builder and digger is most likely to be furthest from anything warm than anyone else. So Matic is going to grab that. Alright, these wash basins to clean our hands after we go potty, we're only going to wash when we're moving right to left, meaning after potty usage. And then we're going to start building a ladder down here to get to this research portal. I'm going to raise the priority of building the outhouse so that it's coming sooner than later. And then where we removed all the wood from this tiny little wood heater shack, I'm going to start filling it up with snow tiles. I'm going to raise the priority of the hand wash stations and the outhouse to 7. So that they are serviced sooner than later. And it looks like the outhouse is out of wood, or out of dirt rather. It needs dirt to operate. So I will dig up some dirt from over here so that we can fuel it, essentially. The other thing is I would very much like to get the barracks set up so that there's somewhere to sleep tonight, because that's going to help to keep them happier. So that's going to be my highest priority. And over here, I will get another outhouse. So going to the construction tool filter. Going to 7. So the outhouse and the floor below it will be 7s, and then the barracks will be an 8. I already have 1 toilet. It's really nice to have 2 toilets in case you have one go out of order. And the same is true of sinks. So the current priority is to set up basic facilities. Very straightforward. Oh, who's getting the crappy bed? So you can actually change skins between. So if you select your bed here, and you go to, like, blueprint, you can actually just change the way it looks. So it doesn't really matter how you build it initially. Once I build the cot, I can turn it into the quilted bed type after the fact, which is totally fine. So this room is already a latrine. So people that use it will get a +1 morale bonus because it is a toilet and a wash station and no industrial machinery. The thing is that we'll have to solve is to give water to the wash basins, which is coming. So yeah, let's change the blueprint here and make it look nice and quilted using magic. So as you can imagine, there is indeed a finite amount of wood pile. So some of our next goals, once we have like bathroom facilities and the like, is to work out what we're going to eat and how we are going to resupply wood. What Both outhouses are now in order. So that's a start. The other thing that we could do to speed people up is walking around on these, like, raw tiles is slower than walking on certain building tiles, right? So some tiles have, like, speed bonuses, like stone tiles, for instance, have run speed bonuses. So slowly replacing things out of wood or stone is going to be more sustainable than just, like, a bunch of packed snow. Because packed snow, even though it's a slow heating thermal insulator, doesn't really provide move speed bonuses, and in larger colonies, move speed is like a major factor. So the slower you move, the less work that gets done, and the less work that gets done, the slower you progress, and, you know, that can really spiral downwards in a way that you want to avoid if possible. So the next goal I have here is set up research and a way to provide food. That's probably the next most urgent. So now that all of this oxalite is, at least for now, going to allow us to breathe, food is the next resource that is going to run out somewhat soon. So these guys are not getting good sleep as a result of the bedroom being too cold. If you're wondering, and that's one of the penalties we face. So talking about some of the local plants, some of the local flora and fauna, trueberry plants are incapable of propagating, but can be harvested for a single food serving. Basically, a one-use. Now, the other thing I wanted to consider, and I already find a pretty good contender here, is one of the big morale bonuses that you can have later on in the game is a nature reserve. And a nature reserve is a room that is no greater than 120 tiles and has up to 4 wild plants in it. And these 4 plants are pretty close to one another, meaning that these 4 plants might make for a good nature reserve seed, in other words. So I'll probably try to preserve these 4 plants as they are, so they can become my nature preserve plants. So we have these shrewberries, and the shrewberries can be eaten once. So we can collect them, but alternatively, the Alveo Vera here, what it does is it absorbs carbon dioxide and produces oxalite. So it is essentially a way to filter carbon dioxide back into oxygen, but it's not 100% efficient. So it requires more carbon dioxide input than it outputs oxygen. And you're probably like, oh man, then that's not a closed loop. But it's actually somewhat of a good thing, because when you're burning wood to stay warm and do other things, you're producing a lot of carbon dioxide. So the Alveo Vera allows you to convert the excess carbon dioxide released from the combustion of wood back into oxygen. So you have to balance it, which is a little tricky, but it's really handy when you do. So that's going to handle some of our oxygen needs. But in terms of our food needs, what is going to be way more reliable is, at least for now, the pike apple. So a pike apple bush, let me open up this database. Pike apple bush produces nutritious fruit, and it requires a temperature between -55 to -14°C. So it requires very cold. It requires almost no air pressure at all. So that's easy to meet. It doesn't really matter if it's an oxygen, carbon dioxide, polluted oxygen. That's easy to meet. And what it needs is, it needs to be fertilized with some phosphorite per cycle and put in a farm plot. And it produces a pike apple. So that is what we are going to be probably initially relying upon. And if you're wondering how much phosphorite I have, if I go to the materials overlay here and go to, what is it? Organic? No. Cultivatable soil? There we go. The pink is the phosphorite. So there's plenty of phosphorite. The tan is like dirt, and the pink is phosphorite. So there's plenty of phosphorite for us to rely on pike apples for quite some time. So there isn't an immediate shortage of phosphorite, which is good. which means we are going to be setting up a pike apple farm. So I'm going to create a higher ladder here, and I'm going to plan on the height of our bathroom being the same height as the Frosty printing pod. Meaning that we will run a floor over here, but probably instead of an actual floor, plant pike apples. So for that to come into fruition, we are going to need to do some research, which means we need a research station. And not only do we need a research station, we're also going to require batteries and a way to generate power as well. So the plan was to create the space for that right above the initial Frosty printing pod. And we're also digging down here to the research portal to gain access to that as well. Some other game theories here, or some other, maybe better put, longer-term strategies, is that carbon dioxide weighs more than oxygen. One way to see that is the carbon dioxide, or the oxygen's on top, the carbon dioxide's at the bottom. So if we want to be using the alveol vera to filter out carbon dioxide back into oxygen, it would help to pull the carbon dioxide kind of at the bottom of things. So to have open, at least 2 wide shafts, like this, all the way down, because gas has trouble passing one another when it's stacked, but when it's too wide, it can sort of zigzag down. So 2 wide shafts, at least 2 wide shafts, all the way down to some sort of bottom pooling area, and then using the bottom pooling area to plant a bunch of alveol vera to be able to passively turn that carbon dioxide back into oxygen. Alright, so in terms of stations, I'm going to stick the research station here and make it out of cinnabar. And then the research station is also going to need a little bit of power and a battery, also made out of cinnabar. And it looks like I am going to be out of cinnabar as a result of that, so I am going to go down here and dig up some cinnabar to feed our projects. So, speaking about the other animals that you see around, flocks. So flocks are non-hostile critters that graze on live or fallen pike apples, and when their antlers are fully grown, they harden into shearable wood. Their lifespan is 100 cycles, and they drop a little bit of meat when killed. So flocks shear for wood. So if we want a relatively easy source of renewable wood, ranching flocks is probably where it's at. So that's the plan. What's the green-blue liquid in the top right corner? Ethanol. Liquid ethanol. Okay, so for the rest of this platform over here, I don't actually need it constructed, so I'm going to tell the dupes not to bother, because it's not immediately relevant to what I'm attempting to do. And then I'll want to wire up these 3 things together so that we can run on the wheel, power up the battery, and then have a research station to look into farming, ranching, and everything else. And we're also getting somewhat close down to the research portal down here, which might offer us unique insight. There also seems to be some sort of facility down here as well. Alright, so some of the other things that you see around. So I've already covered the alveol vera. I've already covered the shrewberry plant and the pike apple bush. We also have mammoths. So mammoths are lumbering, non-hostile creatures that subsist on plume squash, and they can be sheared for reed fiber. They live up to 200 cycles. They have a wider comfortable range than the flocks, if I'm not mistaken. The flocks are, let me double check, but I believe they're cold creatures. Yeah, they do not like to be warmer than 50 Fahrenheit or 10 Celsius. And then the mammoth here can go up to 70 Celsius. So they're a lot wider range of livable temperatures, and they can be killed for a lot of meat. So the flocks can be sheared for reed fibers, which allow you to tailor clothing if you want to stay warmer through insulation. And they eat plume squashes, and then can be killed for like 10 times or even greater than 10 times the meat of a phlox. So phloxes, for reference, are slaughtered for 1600 kcals, which is like nothing at all. It's really nothing at all in as far as this game goes. And then the mammoths are slaughtered for 22,000, right? It's a big difference. The plume squashes, if you're wondering, are squashes that live off of ethanol in farm plots that like cold temperatures. They provide a lot of kcals, and but they're only growable when you have ethanol. And at the moment, I don't have a renewable or easily obtainable source of ethanol. There are pools of ethanol around, but it's going to be a lot harder to grow plume squash initially because of the ethanol requirements than it would be to grow something that requires phosphorite, because phosphorite is mineable and readily available. Any of the other things that I see around. So if you're wondering what these things are, those lumen quartzes, sorry, not corpses. They are like gems that are bright and pretty, and you can carve them to become even brighter and prettier. So they're sort of like a poor man's light bulb, if you will. And it might be useful for us to try to obtain a few early on. And that is, I think, all of the new Frosty Planet Pack stuff that I see. I'm going to try to stay on topic of what is immediately relevant of what I'm working on towards the future. So if you have questions and I don't answer them, it's probably because it's just not particularly relevant to what I'm immediately working on. And I'm waiting until it becomes more relevant. So, first research project. And I'll go over the research tree here. At the top, we have food, which is basic farming. The initial one would also give us composting. So once our outhouses, our composting toilets, are full, it allows us to turn that polluted dirt, which outgasses bad things, back into compostable dirt, which is good. So the algae terrariums are not in standard oxygen not included. Those are pretty usual for trying to produce oxygen early on. But as you can see, there's really not algae here, right? There's no sources of it. So that's a piece of tech that is going to be completely worthless to us. Planter boxes and ration boxes, and then that leads to electric grills. And one of the things I want to do pretty early on is to go for meal preparation, because I want to be growing pike apples and grilling the pike apples into processed foods, which will increase the amount of kcals that we get from them. Not only that, but if we want a renewable source of wood, we need to be feeding pike apples to phloxes. So the pike apples serve two purposes. They offer us a somewhat renewable source of wood through phlox antler shearing, and they offer us our food. So some of the initial research that I want to get is in the food tree. You also have the power tree. The power tree, the first thing you unlock here is the wood burner, which would be useful to us, but is really probably only useful to us when we have a nice renewable source of wood, because you don't want to burn through all your wood supply early on and then be screwed, because there's not a lot of free floating wood in this biome, right? And then the coal burner, and as you can see, there's just not a lot of coal around here either. So coal is definitely not a source of power for us. What is a source of power for us, of course, is wood, once it's renewable, and ethanol. And there is a lot of pools of ethanol around this map tile. Further on in the research, and of course, I'm only reading the initial research. I'm not going all the way into the trees because they get way more complex and they're not going to be relevant for me for a while. So in colony development, we have water cooler, which allows for some morale. Crafting station to be able to fabricate like clothing and the like. Then we have wood heaters. So here is a wood heater that we can research how to build in order to heat up chilly surroundings. And that's something I'm going to want to get pretty early on as well. Brute force refinement allows us to crush rocks into sand and things like that, and crush metal and the like. And then kilns allows us to produce ceramic. I don't see a lot of clay, so that's probably not going to be relevant to us either. And then advanced research, which gives us... So there's multiple types of researches. There's basic and advanced. The basic or the novice research is like blue, and the advanced research is pink, and then there's even like deeper research down here, which you get much later on, which is the interstellar stuff, which you need space rockets for, and I digress. We're not going there just yet. But that offers advanced research. So if I want to get ranching, for instance, ranching requires advanced research because it has both of these bars. So I'm probably going to want to get meal preparation really early on for the farm tiles, and then get advanced research so that I can get ranching. So that we can start ranching floxes. You've got medicine, plumbing, and I'm just going to breeze over these. Gases, gas management, decor, and logical computing. And rocketry doesn't come in until much later. So let's go ahead and, like I said, queue up basic farming and meal preparation. So Scorpio will start working on that. Also, for priorities, if someone else is really good at something, I am going to deprioritize that task for everybody else. So new duplicates, which would be ones that we added in, will have a deprioritized, attack, doctor, cook, decorating, no, not decorating, research, operating, building, and digging, because we already have people that specialize in that. And then the other duplicates that are good at those types of stuff, we'll have it prioritized, which I already did, but then the other ones that are not good at that, we'll have it deprioritized. Because essentially what I want is, Scorpio, for instance, is good at machinery, but Matic is running on the wheel, and that's not something I necessarily want. I mean, I'm not going to stop him, but for the future, it'd be good if the person good at operating is the operator. Alright, we're just one tile away from being able to break into the research portal, which is awesome. So here, Scorpio is researching for us. And then we also have to decide where we are physically going to be putting the farms and Phlox Ranch. So my thinking was having the farm here and the Phlox Ranch just above. And we're almost, this dig is almost reachable, where we will be able to get to this research portal to unlock research for us. And I'm excited about that. I like free research. Thank you for tuning in to Oxygen Not Included, the Frosty Planet, which originally streamed live on Twitch, July 25th. If you have any feedback or questions for me, let me know in the comments below. If you would like to catch a live stream of mine, Rhadamant.com has my stream schedule and countdown timers to upcoming streams. If you would like to join my online gaming community on Discord, Rhadamant.com has a link to it, as does the description of this video. Thank you so very much for watching, and a special thank you to my Patreon patrons, Twitch subscribers, and viewers like you that support the channel and made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. I hope to catch you next episode or upcoming stream. Farewell, my fellow duplicates.